Okay, I'm under my car for a under car video because they are so popular. Just kidding, I kind of hate myself too. Anyways, so I heard another channel talking about Crown Vics having bad ground issues, but no explanation given. And you might other people talk about it, but they never kind of give an explanation why grounds are bad. Well, let's first talk about actually what a bad ground can cause major problems. But first, let's show you what a bad ground is. For one, I noticed when I was under here that Ford, this is a 2009 Crown Vic, Ford decided to use just clip-on grounds to the engine. This is where the starter is. You see I got the starter out. That's what we're kind of dealing with right now. But anyways, that's a really stupid idea. I mean, you want a ground to be a nice solid connection, and secondly, it's attached to a aluminum cross member, which if you watch enough welding videos on trying to weld aluminum, or even if you just know how aluminum works, it forms a oxide coating on the outside, which isn't that great for conducting electricity. So, and being clamped on makes it a lot easier just for this oxide to grow underneath it and pretty much make it null and void. So, I suggest if you have a Crown Vic and you're having ground issues, or even if you're not and you're just at a point like I am where you're doing a lot of work on your car, you might as well just ditch this. I mean, I see a bolt right here. That might be a drain bolt, but there's also a bolt right there. And the frame's right here. Big bolts here, big bolts everywhere. Even if you drilled a damn hole in your frame, which might sound stupid, but as long as you did it right, it'd be fine. Or just find a nice place, because that's just a bad idea. And I mean, the cheapest battery cable you got that has eyelets on both sides would be much better than this. There's another ground up here I'll show you. That's actually bolted to the head. But you see how thin this is. This isn't that great anyways. It's bolted to a little head, which I'm not doing. There's things you could do. You could put dielectrical grease, and it's somewhat, if it's clamped down tight, which you can tighten really good with a bolt, it might not get the oxide under it. But this is just a bad idea, and I'm thinking maybe this is part of my problem. Now I'll explain why grounds are so important. If you've taken basic electronics and understand how basic electronics work, if, for example, what happens with DC voltage, AC voltage is different, but DC voltage is, it's always going to try and find a path to ground. The voltage, no matter what it is, will always try and find a path to ground. So, if you've had a bad ground, it's going to find other sources. You'll see this most common when a body shop or somebody disconnects a ground wire around your lights, and all of a sudden your lights will be dim, or they'll act really funny. What's happening is one of the bulbs missing a ground, trying to find a ground, will take and go through the positive side of it, which will then lead to another bulb, and that's why the other bulb will act weird, and maybe this bulb doesn't work at all. And that's because it's trying to find ground. It will find ground through positive. Any positive wire that goes to a switch, a relay, or anything, or in a case a bulb, will try and find ground, even if it's going through positive. Now, where this becomes an issue is if it's 12 volts looking for a ground and it can't find one, and as the case of my car, which has fried two PCMs, one just burnt out a circuit, which I'll explain what that circuit is. There's a good chance with this problem I'm having is something is trying to find ground, because this is probably no good. So it's going through a sensor or something that's attached to the engine, like this is. And the problem with that is a lot of these sensors on this vehicle only are looking for 5 volts. There's only 5 volts coming from the PCM to the sensor and onto the sensor lead, I'll tell you, or the sensor ground in some cases. So if a ground is bad and it sends 12 volts through a 5-volt circuit, what do you think is going to happen? It's an overload. It's going to short it out. And that's what I think happened with mine. Now, mine has a low amperage 12-volt signal that went to, on this car, the issue I was having was, and they're all related, is first problem was the purge valve was saying it was bad even though it was good, tested fine. Then it went to the EGR valve, and then it said all the O2 sensors were bad. Well, what it was saying, it was couldn't communicate. But what the thing is some of those work off a censored grounded circuit, and they have a common wire coming from the PCM sending voltage to the sensors, and then those sensors are grounded out in different ways to make the stuff work. Well, it's entirely possible at one point when one of these sensors or something, or because of this, was looking for a ground, well, it found the ground through the PCM. And when I say not that the PCM is grounded, it went through a positive circuit, probably all the way back to the PCM, because I didn't quite know what was going on, and the car ran. So hey, what do we do when a car runs and it's already past emissions and we don't care about a check engine light? We drive it, and unfortunately that may have been my issue. Yes, I had a wiring harness issue, which I never could see what was wrong with it, but I knew something was wrong with it. I changed the wiring harness, it was fine. But then the codes never went away, and that's when I decided, well, I'll swap out the PCM. And since then, everything's been fine. No problems whatsoever. So, and like I said, it had already burned out one PCM on this car, and it was doing strange things. Sometimes when you get strange codes, that's when you know that your PCM is bad. And eventually the car just quit running. And so I got one PCM. It was running fine for a while, and then I started getting the weird codes on the circuits I told you. Started with the purge valve, the EGR, and then all of a sudden couldn't communicate with any of the O2 sensors. But basically, that's the thing. And like I said, the other guy said, "Oh, these things have ground issues," but he didn't explain what the issue he found at all, or if he found anything, or why having a ground is bad. And like I said, a bad ground can cause it to search for a ground somewhere else because of poorly designed stuff like this. So, and basically, as I'm repeating myself, I just want to tell you, this is a simple cure. This is a simple cure. I would probably, what I'm going to do once, I could use a body mount, or I'm sorry, take one of the training bolts out and go anywhere out here. I'm sure I could find something. I'll probably most likely do something more on the front of the engine. And I'll, definitely one of the only reasons I'm gonna do to avoid this aluminum stuff, and I'm gonna attach something to the iron block and to the metal frame, and I will double check to make sure that it is properly grounded to the battery, that I'm not creating another issue. Because if you put the ground in the wrong spot, you're doing nothing. You're just moving the problem somewhere else. I mean, you could leave this on. I mean, if it's not doing anything, it's also not doing any harm. But I will replace it with something that's more secure. And if you're worried, if you have, all you can do is find aluminum, or like that thing up there I showed you, the one up there. You could stick some dielectrical grease on it, and that will at least give it a better contact. It will keep moisture out and stuff like that. And it's not a bad idea. I mean, you can't overuse dielectrical grease, so that is my tip, is look for garbage like this. Just get like I said, a cheap battery cable is fine, or if you can find one of these with eyelets on it, whatever you feel like doing. But like I said, just do away with stupidity, and that'll be it for today. See ya.